A rational equation is one that contains a variable in the denominator of a fraction. To solve a rational equation, the first thing that we'll need to do is identify the domain restrictions, which essentially means to identify the x values that could not possibly be the solution. Then we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by the least common denominator, which will enable us to eliminate the fractions. We'll then solve for x in the equation that results, and then check our answer using a calculator. So let's walk through those steps in this example. And this equation is rational because we have an x in the denominator of the fraction. The first thing that we want to do is to identify the domain restrictions. And basically that means that we want to just make note of any x values that could not possibly turn out to be the solution. Because we have an x in the denominator of the fraction, that means that the solution could not be x is equal to 0. If x were 0, we would have 0 in the denominator of the fraction, which would be undefined. So we're just making note of what we know the answer could not possibly be. The next thing that we're going to do is multiply both sides of this equation by the LCD, which stands for the least common denominator. In order to find the LCD, the least common denominator has to contain all of the factors of every denominator in the entire equation. So our LCD has to contain a factor of x. It has to contain a factor of 3, so we'll multiply this x by 3, and we also have to contain a factor of 6. Now, we already have a factor of 3, so we just need to pick up another factor of 2 in order to have a factor of 6 in the LCD. So the LCD in this case turns out to be 6x. Now we want to use this LCD and multiply both sides of the equation by it. When we have a two-sided equation, we can do anything we want to both sides of the equation, and if we choose to multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD over 1, we still have two things that are equal to each other, but the benefit of doing this is that it will eliminate the fractions, making our computation quite a bit easier. So let's start by distributing this LCD into both terms on the left. So we'll end up with 6x over 1 times 3 over x minus 6x over 1 times 1/3. And then on the right-hand side, we'll have 6x times 1 over 6. So this is our LCD times the right-hand side. So now we're looking at 6x over 1 times 3 over x, and we'll notice that the x factor is going to cancel out here, leaving 6 times 3 in the top, which is just 18, minus, let's multiply the LCD now times 1/3, and here we see that the value of 3 is going to divide evenly into 6, leaving a factor of 2 that remains, and so we have 2 and x left in the numerator, which multiplied together gives us just 2x. And this is going to be equal to 6x times 1/6. We can cancel these 6's over multiply, and so the only factor that remains is just x, and so on the right-hand side we have just x. So notice that when we multiplied both sides by the LCD, in that step what happened was that we were able to eliminate the fractions. The next step is that we just solve the resulting equation. And the equation that results here is a simple linear equation. And in order to solve that, we'll get our x terms together, so we'll add 2x to both sides, which leaves us on the left-hand side with just 18, and on the right-hand side we have 3x. And then we'll divide both sides by 3 to completely isolate the x variable. The 3's are going to cancel, and we have x is equal to 6. The last thing that we want to do is check the answer, and we'll check using a graphing calculator. So we come over to our graphing calculator, we'll take our solution of 6 and we're going to store that into the x variable and then hit enter. And then we want to take that 6 and plug it back into the original equation, first plugging it into the left-hand side and then comparing that output with what we get from the right-hand side. So on the left-hand side we have 3 divided by x. Let's demonstrate the fraction feature on the TI-84 that is located in F1, and in order to access this green function we must first hit alpha. So we hit alpha, and then F1 is located over y equals, so we'll hit y equals. And this brings up a menu where the first option is numerator over denominator. We can go up and down this list, but I want to hit enter with my cursor being next to that numerator denominator feature. And this brings up a fraction on the home screen that makes it easier for me to correctly input a fraction. So I have 3 divided by x, and then from that we're going to subtract. Again, let's select alpha F1 to get that numerator-denominator feature, and we'll hit enter. 1 divided by 3. Now this is my left-hand side. We want to hit enter to see what the left-hand side yields with 6 plugged into it. And then we want to compare that to what we have on the right-hand side. We can already see that the left-hand side is going to give us 1/6, and that matches the 1/6 from the right-hand side. So our solution that x is equal to 6 does work.